If you can turn your mind back to playing Warhammer in the mid-90s, there are few experiences as iconic as opening up your model case to reveal a lovely painted Eldar Avatar. Or, more accurately, opening up your model case to reveal that your lovely painted Eldar Avatar has disintegrated into several parts, and then asking your strangers around you if anyone brought any superglue. The Avatar manages to capture the grim, dark aesthetic in a very alien way to the choking bureaucracy of the Imperium. The recipe is simple. Stick an axe-spec warrior in the oven at 200 degrees, and 90 minutes later, out pops a freshly baked Avatar of the bloody-handed god. If your only exposure to 40k in the 90s was reading White Dwarf magazine, you might remember he was only in one battle report, where he defeated an Aversa assassin in close combat, which was at the time a pretty impressive feat, before running forward unsupported and getting shot to pieces by almost the entire Imperial Guard army opposing it. In fact, the Avatar was very good at winning close combats, as it was weapon skill 10 back when that was a big deal. In fact, I think only the Bloodthirster could truly challenge him one-on-one, and he was one of the few models that wouldn't be in too much danger if he was fully surrounded. However, to really start earning his points back, he needed to be in contact with enemy tanks, where he would deal 5 hits a turn with an armor penetration of 8 plus d20, or an enemy character that had misguidedly stumbled into his charge range. The Avatar had a long list of things it was immune to, starting with the fact that at toughness 8, and this being 2nd edition, meant that anything strength 4 or lower could never wound it. It was also immune to heat-based weapons like multi-melters, melter guns, and flamers, which amusingly meant that a Sisters of the Battle army only had one model carrying a heavy bolter that could ever damage it in the shooting phase. This list of immunities included poison, like the needle sniper rifles carried by certain units, virus weapons, like the infamous virus grenade and virus outbreak strategy card, gas, like the obscure hallucinogen, choke or scare grenades, and blinding, like the forgotten photon beam searchlight that you could give to models in Terminator armor. Finally, it was also immune to plasma weapons, including the sponsons on a Lehman Russ Demolisher or the linked plasma on the turret of a Space Marine Razorback. As a large monster, it also caused terror, which was a fun little rule where at the start of the turn units would have to take a leadership test or flee directly away from it. Also, if you could pull off that red to yellow gradient on the sword, you were considered one of the top painters in the world in the 90s. Now that I've shined up the Avatar, it's time to fire up the Battle Report-O-Matic and see how one would appear on the battlefield. This software actually smells of Lynx Africa. The Avatar was only in one battle report and his unit icon wasn't very impressive. However, we can update the graphic files here and bingo. The Avatar now matches models like vehicles, greater demons and hive tyrants. If I play with the settings here, I should be able to insert him into a small game and see how he works. Okay, that was pretty much what I expected. I wonder if I can adjust things so the Avatar is a better showing. And the software has crashed. Apologies, but we're using stuff from the 90s here, so you'll have to bear with me. I did read some strange reviews of this software on GitHub. Apparently the code is unreadable in places. I think you can sum up the Avatar using the same sentence you can sum up 2nd edition. The trouble starts once the game begins. The key thing to remember is that the Avatar is a square peg in an army full of round holes, if that makes sense. Tyranids or Space Marines would love a 300-point character that was immune to a whole host of weapons and supported by units that could draw enemy fire while it moved to capture an objective or break a defensive line. Meanwhile, in an Eldar army, he couldn't be used to hold back and defend a position like a Dreadnought or Warwalker, as his Sword the Wailing Doom could only be used to make a single shooting attack at 12-inch range. Wraithguard at this time only had Wraith Cannons, as a combat variant of them doesn't exist, and while its movement value of 6 inches is faster than a lot of units, it still meant it was only reaching combat in turn 3 unless your opponent moved towards him. As a character, he could only be targeted if he was the closest model. However, most things that could move forward with him, like Howling Banshees or jet bikes, would be almost instantly destroyed by enemy fire, even in the battle reports of the time, which weren't exactly filled with the most powerful armies. However, what I think really drives a nail into the coffin of the Avatar is that 2nd edition is the edition where heavy weapons were absolutely devastating against large multi-wound creatures. The Avatar had a toughness value of 8, 7 wounds, and a 2+ armor save that could only be reduced as low as 4+. Now, this sounds really good on paper and worked well against small arms fire. However, if a heavy bolter, for instance, did manage to score the required 6 to wound, it would knock the armor down to that 4+ level, and if that was not saved, deal D4 damage, and heavy bolters are considered some of the weaker heavy weapons. Las cannons were strength 9 with 2d6 damage, missile launchers were strength 8 and did d10 damage, and these were just the weapons that you got in the starter box. To make matters worse, an avatar is also automatically your army's commander, so if the opponent had drawn the mission card Assassins, it would reward them with the bonus 5 victory points in addition for the 3 for killing a 300 point enemy character. We can fire up the battle report-o-matic again and see what might happen. The Avatar sounds fragile before we start listing the usual suspects, such as shock attack guns and distort cannons that had their own damage tables that frequently ended up in instant death for the victim. And, of course, the classic Vortex grenade. The Avatar would also need to be protected from psychic powers, especially from the Inquisition deck, as Vortex was really powerful against large, slow-moving models. Also, Destroy Demon would have a reasonable chance of killing. Okay, so we have another crash, and it doesn't seem to be responding now. It looks like something's leaking out the side of my computer. Well, I guess I'm going to have to wrap this up. In conclusion, the Avatar is thematically excellent, although overshadowed by other choices in the Codex that have better synergy. Farseers and Warlocks would be better support, while 2nd edition would arguably be the high watermark for the power of Elder X-Archers and even certain Phoenix Lords. If you are going to play 2nd edition 40k, you're going to play it for the nostalgia value rather than to show off an ultra-powerful unit or combo that obliterates anything it touches. But on the other hand, you shouldn't need to keep your centrepiece model hidden behind a building all game in fear that a rogue shot from a heavy weapon might scatter onto it. As an aside, that's exactly how Marneus Caldos spent the Icar 4 mega battle in White Dwarf 191 before almost being killed by a spore mine in the last turn of the game. You take an Avatar because of the nostalgia. There might be some tactical use for it, perhaps with Dreadnoughts to act as bodyguards, or with Harlequins and jet bikes to tie up the enemy on turn 1, or just sneaking it up the board behind a large piece of scenery to provide cover. Then, with a little bit of luck, it can stay on the table just long enough for someone else to wander over and see what's going on. And maybe, just maybe, after seeing such an old model, they give you the nod to say, well done.